Welcome to episode 682 of the Entertainment 2.0 podcast, brought to you by thedigitalmediazone.com. I'm Josh Pollard, and this is the show that puts you in control of your favorite movies, music, shows, and games. It's been a couple of weeks, but I'm back this week, but, other things prevented us from doing, the show with both me and Richard, and from doing it live and all of that fun stuff. So, a shorter episode for you, focusing on three of the biggest news stories of the last couple of weeks. So, Plex, we've been talking about their new experience that they've been working on, and it's arrived. So, we'll talk to you about what you can expect from that and how to get it. There's a new device called the AirFly Pro 2, which makes watching movies on the plane or on a treadmill far more enjoyable. And Nintendo, probably the biggest news of really the last few weeks. Nintendo announced all of the details for the Switch 2. So we're going to get into all of that. We're going to save the listener feedback for next week when Richard can be here on the show. So if you'd like to send us any feedback, you can email us entertainment20@thedigitalmediazone.com. So let's jump right on into the news. We'll start with the video news. We're going to start with Plex, one of our favorite apps for watching both your own personal media collection and for some online streaming also. So we've been talking for a few months about the new experience that Plex has been developing. They're really starting this big overhaul on mobile, and now it's available to essentially everybody. So what do you get out of this new experience? Well, in general, you just get a better, cleaner UI that's going to make it easier for you to find the things that you want to watch faster and maybe use the features that you care about the most easier and faster. So what can you expect from this? Well, there's a new navigation bar. The old hamburger menu is gone. You've got a menu navigation bar across the bottom that will give you things like quick shortcuts to, the home screen, your libraries, a nice collection of libraries there, a live TV option, an on-demand option, and Discover. And then across the top, I think are also some really useful navigation items. There's a search button, a casting button, your watch list, and then there's a profile icon, which is how you can get to your profile, friends, services, and all of the settings that you might want to customize. And while navigation updates maybe don't sound like the most impressive new feature, I think they're worth digging into here, because I think depending on how you use the Plex app, or maybe I would argue kind of regardless of how you use the Plex app, these navigation changes, I think, are a pretty nice improvement to things. If you've got access to lots of different libraries, it's easier to get to them. Before you had to dig into the hamburger menu, and then maybe you didn't have everything pinned. So it was just kind of a nightmare if you were just trying to dig in and find a collection in the libraries. And now with the libraries button in the main bottom screen nav, that makes it way, way easier. It's then, filtered by categories and things like that. But you also have filters that are easily available. Or if you just want to browse directly, there is the browse option. There's the collections option if you are a big user of collections. And all of these things work across different libraries. So if you want to go to the categories section and look for all of the animation across all of the libraries that you have access to, that's super, super easy now. So, that's probably the main experience for most people. That is dramatically better. The other things that I like about the navigation, though, they're really the two things that I probably use the most with the mobile app. One is search. I use Plex as the way of finding out if someone tells me about a show that I should watch. I look for it on Plex because Plex does a fantastic job of telling me where I can watch it. Is it available on a streaming service? Is it not available on a streaming service and I would have to go and buy it or rent it directly? It's all available in there, and I love that search functionality in Plex. Just the other day, a friend was telling me they're watching *Halt and Catch Fire*. I remember starting that series years ago, but I had no clue what streaming service it's on. So I looked it up on Plex. Turns out it's on AMC Plus. I never would have guessed that because it's been so long since I've seen it. So Plex was able to quickly tell me that, and getting into the search feature now is super easy. It's right at the top of the screen. It's right there. The other thing that I think is important is that watch list button. It's second from the right at the top of the screen. It's a very prominent icon. The watch list, I think, is another really great feature in Plex. Even if you're not using Plex at all to watch content, just the search and watch list functionality, I think, might be enough to recommend continuing to use this app for most people, because you can search for anything regardless of where it is, and then you can add it to your watch list. And then when you've finished a show like White Lotus just finished, and a lot of people are going, I don't know what to watch next. My guess is you've been getting recommendations from people for months, if not years. If you add those to your watch list, then you don't have to try and remember what it was that you wanted to watch because it's all right there in Plex. And again, Plex will tell you where you can watch it. Those two features alone, I think, make it like a no-brainer recommendation. Just go install the Plex app on your phone just for those two features. Even if you don't care about their free ad-supported TV streaming, or you don't ever intend to build your own Plex server for housing all of your own content, just those two features, more than enough value out of this app, considering it's free, right? So go and download it. It should be available to you by the time you're listening to this episode. If not, it's rolling out over the next couple of days on Android and iOS. If not, well, and you just can't wait to see the new version, there's the preview version that's way easier to get if you're on Android. And then otherwise, I guess just wait a couple of days. But friend of mine, friend of the show, Jim, did write in to let me know over the last few days. He updated the Plex app on his iPhone before updating his Plex server, and he was a little bit surprised to see that there was a message saying he couldn't connect to his server because his server version was, didn't meet the minimum requirements. Now, there's lots of information about this in the Plex forums and all of that, but it's not, if you're just opening up your app store to update a mobile app, there's nothing there telling you, oh, you might not want to update this. So I don't know. It's real easy to get in a situation where you're not going to be able to connect to your server first. So make sure if you are running a server that you go and update that. But frankly, if you're running a server, you probably just should turn on automatic updates anyway and save yourself the hassle. So that's your caveat. Don't update the mobile app until you've updated your server. And then one more reminder, we talked about this on the last episode. The cost of Plex Pass for all of the extra features that you can get out of Plex is increasing near the end of the month. So if you're still considering getting Plex Pass, right now is the time to hurry on over and get yourself a lifetime Plex Pass for $119 before the price goes up dramatically. It's worth it if you're using Plex for all of those extra features. So go and check that out. And for more details, go and listen to our last episode where we break that all down for you. On the audio news side, I want to talk about a new device. It's really a sequel of a device. In fact, our last two stories are both about hardware that are sequels. So this time around, though, it is the AirFly Pro 2. And this is a small little dongle device that you can plug into any device that has a headphone jack. So think about a treadmill at your gym, or the airplane entertainment system when you're flying somewhere, or anything else that just has a headphone jack. You plug this dongle into it, and it's just a Bluetooth dongle, but it's better than a regular Bluetooth dongle in a few ways. So this new version, well, it's got a new chip inside of it, which improves audio quality, improves background noise, decreasing background noise. It also decreases latency. So if you're watching TV through one of these systems, you're less likely to notice like the sound that you're hearing of the voices. Like it ought to pretty much match up to the people's mouths opening and closing with this decreased latency support. It also, the new device, it has a dedicated volume button right on the dongle. Maybe your headphones, your Bluetooth headphones that you're connecting to this don't have volume control, or maybe it's complicated to use, especially if you're running on a treadmill. That can be challenging if it's using like swipe-based controls and things like that. So having an actual dedicated volume button on the dongle could really come in handy. The other cool thing about this, and I think this is especially useful for those airplane entertainment systems, is this dongle has Bluetooth multi-point support, and it's a little bit different than how we're used to thinking of Bluetooth multi-point. In this case, it means that you can connect two pairs of headphones to this dongle at the same time. So if you're on a flight with your partner or your kid or something like that, and you both want to watch the same thing at the same time, you can do that on one screen with two different pairs of headphones. So pretty nice feature to have along with you there. And the device, it's pretty small. This is definitely going to pack into your carry-on bag or your gym bag if you're taking it to the gym to plug into your treadmill really, really easily because it's tiny. And it's available now. This new version, it's available right now. It is a little bit more expensive than the previous one, but it's $60. If this is a device that you could use all the time, well, I think this is a pretty fair price for what you're getting out of it. Are there other devices out there that do similar things for less money? Yes, but this is a trusted brand that's been doing it well for a long time. So I would take a look at the AirFly Pro 2 if you're looking for a new Bluetooth dongle. Last up, and undoubtedly our biggest news of really the last few weeks, and that is Nintendo held their big event and they gave us all ? At the very least, most of the Nintendo Switch 2 details that we have been waiting for. All right, so a lot of this is hardware, so let's dig into that. It's a much bigger device than the previous one. It has a 7.9-inch screen compared to the original Switch, which was a 6.2-inch screen. So, you're looking at almost 2 inches bigger screen. For older people like me, that sounds pretty great. It is also a higher resolution screen at 1080p and with a higher refresh rate. It is a 1080p 120 hertz display screen, and that 120 hertz also includes variable refresh rate, so that'll be nice to have also. And it's an HDR screen, and while it's 1080p on the screen that's built into the device, when it's docked, it will display at 4K. It has significantly more storage than the previous one. The old Switch only had 32 gigabytes of storage. This one comes with 256 gigs of storage. That still doesn't seem like much, but Switch games tend to be a lot smaller. If it's not enough, though, they've also updated and upgraded the expansion capabilities. The original Switch used regular micro SD cards. The Nintendo Switch 2 uses a new standard called micro SD Express cards. The main difference? They're a whole lot faster. Unfortunately, that also means they're more expensive. It's still a relatively new standard. It's not as widely in use. So these cards do cost more than the cards that you were buying for a regular Switch. I believe it's all backwards compatible. You could still use regular micro SD cards with it, but they just wouldn't be as fast. But I should double check on that to make sure that you could still play games off of a regular micro SD card. Sticking with the hardware side of it, it now has a built-in microphone similar to, say, the PlayStation controllers on the PlayStation 5, so that you can do voice chat right through the microphone built into the controllers. And the controllers have a new C button. That C basically means communication or chat, probably more like chat. And that is the button that allows you to do things like voice chat with your friends. I'm not going to get into all of the details around how that all works. It's similar to Discord or Xbox Live Chat. It will require a subscription, just like it does on Xbox and PlayStation, but the experience looks a whole lot better than what the Switch or any previous Nintendo system had for online voice chat. The Joy-Cons get some upgrades. First off, they attach magnetically instead of with that complicated latch system that always felt like it was going to break at any moment. The Joy-Cons have bigger thumbsticks on them too, which should make them a little bit more comfortable. And interestingly, you can hold them and use them sort of like a mouse. And this was shown off with a new Metroid Prime game coming out where you could essentially hold the left Joy-Con in your left hand, using that as the forward, back, left, right strafe controls that you might use that you might map to like WASD on a keyboard, and then use the Joy-Con as a mouse. So it's similar to mouse and keyboard support on a PC. Now, this isn't revolutionary. The Legion Go gaming handheld has a similar functionality, but I don't know. I kind of imagine that the experience on the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be better in some ways. Nintendo's just really good at making sure that these experiences work really, really well. All right, so that's most of the hardware. Now, let's talk about pricing and some of the other aspects. Oh, actually, there's one other thing that I want to talk about with the hardware, and that is these Joy-Cons. They do look better in most ways, but maybe not in one key way. See, the Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons were notorious for something called stick drift. And that's a phenomenon that happens when your joysticks start to get worn out. And what happens is you will not be touching the joystick at all, but it will be registering movement as if you were pressing in a specific direction. Obviously, that's a big problem. You don't like that. It's not good. And the main way that hardware manufacturers have solved this since then, there are multiple ways of solving this, but the most common way is to use a new type of technology called Hall effect joysticks. We're seeing it in more and more controllers, and shockingly, the Nintendo Switch 2 is not one of them. The Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Cons do not use Hall effect sticks. So we'll have to see what they have in store for eliminating stick drift on these things as we go, because they're not cheap. We'll get into that in a second. Let's talk about the cost of the Switch 2 itself. It's launching on June 5th, which is nice. It's not that far away. The price, though, this is where some people are a little bit annoyed. $449 for the Switch 2. That's $150 more expensive than the base price of the Nintendo Switch. And wow, that's a lot. And it's $100 more than the Switch OLED. When you compare it to the Switch OLED, well, $100 more maybe doesn't sound so bad, although you're not getting an OLED screen on this. While the screen is bigger and better in many, many ways, it's an LCD screen. Now, the gaming media that have gotten hands-on with it are largely saying it still looks really good. It's bright. It actually does have decent contrast, but it's not an OLED. So $450 for this device. It's significantly more expensive than the previous one, but the previous one is what, 8 years old at this point? So it does make sense that the newer device is going to be more expensive, especially considering how much inflation has risen in the last 5 years, especially. But it's not just the console that's getting more expensive. Everything is getting more expensive with the Switch 2. The Joy-Cons, they're $90 now. They were already kind of too expensive on the Switch, and now they're even more expensive. Most of the games, the big first-party games are more expensive. They're going to be $80. The new Mario Kart game is $80 if you buy it separately. And $80 for a Mario Kart game kind of sounds, to a lot of people, kind of ridiculous. Most of the brand new AAA games on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, they're $70. So Nintendo's taken a pretty big leap here because Switch games were $60 and oftentimes $50. And now they're going from 60 to 80 in one generation, leapfrogging over PlayStation and Xbox for games that are still, we'll get into this more in a second, but still lower fidelity than what we would get on a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X. This might be the thing that has the people, that has gamers the most riled up, paying that much more for games. I'm kind of conflicted on it because $80 for a Switch game, it does seem like a lot, because they are still Switch games. But at the same time, I've been watching the video game industry just bleed talent left and right, especially over the last few years. Studios closing like crazy, studios laying off huge portions of their staff because games are getting very, very, very expensive to make and harder to recoup that money from sales. So I do want the people making these games to make a good living and get paid for what they're doing. But this dramatic of an increase in the price of games, it's just that it's such a big leap. I don't think any reasonable person is going to be upset at prices going up a little bit over time. When the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X launched in 2020, and we saw game prices go from $60 to $70, we were like, okay, it's 2020. Games have been $60 since the Xbox 360 launched. That was almost 15 years prior. But now we're seeing a $20 leap in less than 10 years. That's a pretty big jump. So I don't love that. But like I said, I'm feeling a little bit conflicted there. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It is what it is. This is what Nintendo has chosen. I don't expect them to go back on this. Look for sales when you can. But honestly, Nintendo's first-party games, they don't go on sale that much. And when they do, it's typically not by very much. A $60 Switch game, it'll pretty frequently get marked down to $50. It will, at times like Black Friday, maybe drop down to $40. And in extremely rare circumstances, you can find a first-party Nintendo game for half off. But it's super rare. So that kind of leads me into going back to talking a little bit about the pricing of this. It's more expensive. It is. And the games are more expensive and the hardware is everything is more expensive here. But at the end of the day, if you want to play Nintendo games, this is what you need to do. This is your only option. You're not going to be playing Mario Kart anywhere else. It has to be on the Switch and the Switch 2. So if that's what you want, this is the price you're paying. And so don't wait around for sales. Like if you're thinking, well, at Black Friday, the Switch 2 will be cheaper. No, it won't. It won't. I guarantee you that it won't be. So just buy it when you're ready to buy it because it won't go on sale very often. And what you really should do is pre-order it with Mario Kart because this is the only way you're actually going to get a deal on anything. Like I said, Mario Kart is $80. The Switch 2 is $450. If you buy the Switch 2 with Mario Kart, that bundle is $500. So you're saving yourself $30 there, which will be pretty nice considering you're almost definitely buying at least another set of Joy-Cons for $90. So for $590, you can have yourself a Switch 2 with Mario Kart and 2 sets of Joy-Cons. And when you start to add in those necessary accessories and stuff like that, you really start to see how expensive this ends up being, because you're not just going to spend $450. If you did that, you wouldn't have any games to play, at least not any new games to play. Because let's talk a little bit more about the software now. So the Switch 2 does offer backwards compatibility. That means you will be able to play many Switch games on the Switch 2. They'll just work. But the interesting thing is that while the Switch 2 uses a processor from NVIDIA, just like the previous one did, it seems as though there's enough differences in that processor that it's not just everything basically just works. Because there's actually a pretty large list of Switch 1 games that don't work on Switch 2, at least not right now. And that I find really interesting, because I don't think the architecture of this chip has changed that much, but we'll find out more once people actually start to get their hands on these things and start to tear things apart and dig deeper into that. But I do find that really interesting. So there's that situation. What about the performance? Like, the big thing about the Switch has always been, well, it's not as powerful as the Xbox, but it's portable. And so it's a reasonable trade-off. And for a few years there, it was a very reasonable trade-off, because it wasn't that far behind in terms of performance from the Xbox One and PlayStation 4, but it's really, really started to feel its age over the last few years. And then especially when you compare it to the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, oof, yeah, not great performance. So what do we expect out of the Switch 2? Well, it's definitely better. It's definitely better. The games look good. A lot of these games are going to run at that 120 hertz refresh rate, depending on what they are. And some of them will supposedly run 4K at 120 hertz when you've got it docked and hooked up to your 4K TV. And games are going to look better in some ways. And it's been confirmed that because this chip is from NVIDIA, it will also support some version of DLSS. So you've got that technology going for you also. So what can we actually expect in terms of performance? Well, based on what people have been able to determine so far, based it on what NVIDIA has said about this chip, and just like really, really analyzing gameplay video that has been released, it sounds like you're going to be looking at graphical fidelity and power similar to a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One. That doesn't sound that bad to me. That sounds pretty decent from a portable device, especially a portable device at $450. And that's a portable device where everything's just going to work. I've talked a lot about the Steam Deck and especially these Windows handhelds like the Legion Go and the Asus ROG Ally, the MSI Claw. They're cool devices, but especially these ones that are running Windows, like there's some work that you got to do to play your games. With a Switch 2, it's just load the cartridge in, play your games, you're good to go. So that's good. But the other thing that I'm a little torn about here is I'd kind of hoped they would find a way to squeeze even more power out of this thing. The downside to the mobile gaming ecosystem in 2025 is the new chips, they're not that much more powerful than the previous chips. So if you've already got last year's version of a handheld PC, there's probably not really much of a reason to upgrade this year, because the the Z2 Extreme processor doesn't sound like it's going to be dramatically faster than the Z1 Extreme that most of those devices used. So I'd hoped that maybe Nintendo, with the money of Nintendo, and with, more importantly, the number of units that they can guarantee that they will ship, because that's what really matters. When one of these companies goes to a chip manufacturer and says, we need you to build us a really awesome chip to put in our device, the first question that those chip manufacturers ask is, okay, sure, how many can you promise that you'll sell? Well, if you're Valve, you can say, well, we've sold a couple of million Steam Decks, and they laugh at you. If you're Lenovo or Asus, well, that number is even smaller, and they really laugh at you. But if you're Nintendo, you're like, well, I've sold 100 million Switches. I think it's more than that at this point. Well, then the chip manufacturer is interested. Like, that's real numbers. That's scale. That's the scale they're looking for when it comes to creating a new chip. This chip just doesn't sound like the biggest leap in technology that I was hoping for, though. And maybe it's just because I was hoping for too much. We've been talking about these new NVIDIA, desktop and laptop chips that were announced, the 50 series chips that were announced this year. And the raw rasterization, I think that's the right word, performance increases in the 5000 series versus the 4000 series, it's not actually that much better. Where they're getting big performance gains is using software. It's AI software and doing frame generation and things like that. It's not actually all that much more powerful of a chip. They've just come up with better algorithms and software that's running on these chips to make your games look better and potentially run faster. So maybe I was the one with unrealistic expectations that Nintendo would find a way to make a bigger leap forward. Was I expecting them to give us a handheld that would run games at 4K, 120 hertz, and games like Call of Duty or the latest Assassin's Creed or anything like that? No, that's like, physics still matters. I wasn't expecting that. But I was expecting, or at least maybe not expecting, hoping for more. Just hoping for more. And that maybe it would be a chip that some of the other competitors would use. I don't think that's going to be the case, though. It's an NVIDIA mobile chip, basically. And I don't see these handheld PC manufacturers going with that for their devices. Okay, so one other thing we've got to talk about here is how and when can you actually purchase this? I mentioned it launches on June 5th. I'm recording this on April 9th. When this event happened on April 2nd, they said pre-orders start April 9th. And then a couple of days later, they had to reverse that. And they said, you know what, hold on. We're going to pause that. We're not going to start taking pre-orders on the 9th because, as everybody knows, the Trump tariffs came into play. And the Trump tariffs have been huge and wide-ranging across most countries in the world, it seems. And they're big. They're really big, especially for things that are coming out of China. I don't know off the top of my head if Nintendo is manufacturing all of these in China or if it's another country. But regardless of where they are, the tariffs are big. They're really big. And so Nintendo said, we're going to pause on pre-orders until we figure out what this tariff situation actually looks like. So we're going to wait a little while longer because tariffs went into effect at the end of last week. More tariffs went into effect yesterday. And today, some of those tariffs were reversed. So I think that Nintendo is smartly waiting because these tariffs could have a major impact on the cost of this device. And so they're not going to take a bunch of $450 pre-orders in April for a device that could cost significantly more, at least in the United States, when it launches in June. So keep a lookout, for when you might be able to pre-order this thing. They're saying, regardless of tariffs, it's still shipping June 5th. We just don't know yet when you're going to pre-order one. And again, I'd like to go back and say, if you're interested in this, just pre-order it. If you have the money. now, then just pre-order because you won't be getting a deal on it later. The only reason you shouldn't get it right now is if the launch lineup of games doesn't seem that interesting to you. These will be hard to get. If you think you are going to want one this year and you can do it now, you should pre-order the Switch 2. That's going to be your best way to ensure that you're actually going to be able to get your hands on one this year. All right, that's it for the news this week. Let's jump into what's been going on in my entertainment center. I did a lot of traveling over the last week, but that actually meant that I was able to play and watch a few more things. The playing aspect is because now I've got this Legion Go and I was able to play games on the plane. And what did I play on my multiple flights over the last couple of weeks? Citizen Sleeper. It is a role-playing game that is available on Xbox Game Pass, both console and PC. And it's a cool, really interesting game. It's a shorter role-playing game. It is a sci-fi story where you are sort of like an android that wakes up on a different spaceship, and you've got some things to do to try and figure out how to make a new life for yourself. And it's just got a really interesting gameplay loop. There's lots of different choices, lots of different ways that this game can play out. And like I said, it's fairly short. So if you've got Game Pass, go and check it out. It's a game I've been interested in for a while and got even more interested in it when Citizen Sleeper 2 came out this year. So I wanted to see how much I would like it because Citizen Sleeper 2, I believe, is also on Game Pass. When I have been home, which hasn't been a lot, I have been playing through more of The Last of Us Part 2. I still feel like I've got so much to go. I think I'm 10 or 11 hours into it at this point. So I'm maybe halfway-ish in the game, but it's still great. Movies, no movies for me over the last couple of weeks, but TV, I mentioned a few weeks ago that Jen and I started watching The Pit together, and I had told her when we first started watching it, you know what, I think you can watch this without me. It's a really great show, but I just have a hard time with these medical dramas and stuff. I've reversed that thinking. I love this show. It is so good. This is one of the best shows. I was going to say on television right now. That feels like a weird statement to say in 2025. What does that mean? This is one of the best shows that you could be watching right now. It's on Max. This week is the season finale, I believe. So it's a great time to pick up a show because you're not going to have to wait a week in between every single episode. So go and get Max and watch The Pit if you like medical dramas at all. It is so well done. Very, I don't like to use this word, but I think that compelling is a good word to describe the show. It is very compelling content. I've also been watching more of For All Mankind. I finally finished up season 1 of that show. I will still say there are parts of the show that are just a little too slow. As the season went on, it definitely picked up. We'll see how season 2 goes. I'm going to keep watching, but I would really like it if the pace would pick up in general across the board for this show. And then books. I believe I mentioned this last time. I've been reading a book called The City and Its Uncertain Walls. I'm going to try and guess how to pronounce this Japanese author's name. Haruki Murakami. Very, very interesting book. It's definitely more in that literary fiction genre that a lot of people describe, where there's a lot to think about here for what you might think that this book is trying to tell you. If you're into literary fiction, it's worth checking out. I've heard since reading this book that this author apparently is known for being, or at least writing characters that were maybe misogynistic and things like that. I don't really get that from the characters in this book. I don't know if that's true of his other books though. So I'll give you that. But it's good. Like if you're into, like I said, more literary fiction, it's worth checking out. It is on Spotify Premium, But Spotify only gives you 15 hours of audiobooks per month, and this book is like 16 and a half hours. So that may not be the best way for you to consume it. Maybe get it from your library or on Audible. All right, that is going to do it for this week. If you want to get a hold of us, I'm at Josh Pollard on Blue Sky. I'm technically on Twitter also, but I don't really use that much anymore. Digimedia Zone on Twitter. Richard is at Richard Gunther on Mastodon, and he's richardgunther.com on Blue Sky. And, sometimes we do the show live. Lately, it's been Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. That's for any more live shows that we do in the month of April will continue to be on Tuesdays. But on Wednesdays. But by the time May rolls around, my schedule changes and maybe we'll be back to Tuesdays. But that is going to do it for episode 682. I'm Josh Pollard. Thanks for listening to Entertainment 2.0. Adios.